The scorching summer sun beat down on the crowded park. Children ran, laughter echoing through the air, while their parents sat scattered on benches under fatting trees. Among them was Armin, a middle-aged man pushing an old ice cream cart with squeaky wheels. His shirt clung to his back with sweat, but he forced a smile at every child who ran toward him with shining eyes. For Armin, this cart wasn't just work, it was survival. Once, he had been an office clerk, neat tie and polished shoes, but debts, layoffs, and illness had stripped his life bare. The cart was all he had left. Every cone he handed out carried more than vanilla and chocolate. It carried his hope that he could buy medicine for his wife, or a book for his son who no longer asked for anything. That day, a little girl with messy pigtails came running to him. She couldn't have been more than 7. Her hands clutched a few coins so tightly they left marks on her palms. She looked up at him with wide brown eyes. "One ice cream, please," she said breathlessly. Then she paused, staring at the coins, biting her lip. "Actually, 2." Armin chuckled. Children always wanted more than one. "Are you that hungry?" he teased gently as he prepared the cones. The girl shook her head. "No, sir. One is for me and one is for my brother." Armin looked around, but no other child stood near her. "Where is your brother?" he asked, puzzled. Her eyes darted down and her voice lowered to a whisper that seemed too heavy for someone so small. He's not here anymore. Mama says he's in heaven, but when I eat ice cream, I always buy one for him too. I don't want him to feel left out." Armin froze. His hand trembled as the scoop slipped and fell back into the tub. He stared at her tiny face, at the earnest way she looked at the empty space beside her, as if she truly believed her brother might appear any moment. The coins she offered were barely enough for 1 cone, let alone 2. She didn't seem to notice or care. Her little world was built on love, not math. Armin's throat tightened. He remembered his own son, thin and coughing in bed, asking once for ice cream he couldn't afford. He had promised next time, but there had been no next time. With a trembling smile, he handed her 2 cones, 1 chocolate and 1 vanilla. "Here," he whispered, his voice catching, "for you and for your brother." The girl's face lit up like sunshine. She nodded firmly, as if sealing a secret pact, then ran off to sit on the grass, placing 1 cone carefully beside her as though someone invisible would take it. Armin watched, his chest aching, a storm of grief and tenderness battling inside him. For the first time in years, he felt tears burn his eyes in public, but he didn't wipe them away. Part 2. Armin couldn't pull his gaze away. The little girl sat cross-legged, licking her ice cream slowly, while occasionally glancing at the untouched cone, speaking in hushed tones as if answering someone only she could hear. The world bustled around her, parents shouting, swings squeaking, vendors yelling, but she was lost in her own sacred bubble of memory. Every scoop he sold afterward felt mechanical, his thoughts circling back to her. He noticed she wore faded sandals, the strap nearly torn. Her dress was patched at the hem, yet her eyes carried a warmth that money couldn't buy. She finished her cone, then carefully took the melting vanilla one and held it close, whispering, "Don't eat too fast, okay? You always get brain freeze." Then she giggled, a sound so pure it twisted his heart. Armin turned his cart away for a moment, pretending to fix the lid, but really he was fighting to breathe. His son's face, pale and smiling weakly from his sickbed, haunted him. He remembered the day the hospital called to say it was too late. He remembered clutching a melting cone in his hand that he had finally bought, running to the ward, but his boy had already slipped away. That cone had dripped uselessly onto the floor, a cruel reminder of promises broken. And now, before him, was a little girl keeping her own promise alive, refusing to forget, refusing to let love die, even if it lived only in her imagination. When she finally stood, she placed the half-eaten cone carefully on the bench, whispering, "I'll come again tomorrow. I'll bring you another." Then she skipped away toward a tired-looking woman calling her name. Armin stepped forward, wiping his hands on his apron. "Wait," he called softly. The girl turned, tilting her head. He pressed a small wrapped ice cream bar into her hands. "For your brother, just in case he gets hungry later." Her face lit up again, brighter than any sun. "Thank you, sir," she chirped, clutching it like treasure before running off. Armin stood frozen, watching her disappear into the crowd. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like just a tired man pushing a cart. He felt like he had honored his son in some small, fragile way by keeping another child's love alive. The cart's wheels squeaked as he moved again, but this time, his heart was lighter. Every cone he handed out carried not just survival, but remembrance and maybe redemption. Would you like me to also create thumbnail text plus description plus hashtags plus keywords for this story, like we did with your previous ones? So it's ready for posting. Armin stood still for a long time, watching the little girl skip away, her tiny frame swallowed by the crowd. The ice cream bar he had given her still glistened in her hand like a piece of treasure. He could almost imagine her running home and placing it beside an empty chair, talking to her absent brother as if he were there. The image sent another shiver through his chest. He wiped his forehead with the back of his arm and pushed his cart toward the shade of a tree. The squeaky wheels groaned in protest, as if they too carried the weight of his memories. For years, Armin had moved through life like a ghost, dragging his sorrow behind him. He worked, he ate, he slept, but the fire in him had gone out when his son's last breath left his fragile body. His boy, Raffi, had been only 8. A bright child with eyes too wise for his age, he had once begged for ice cream during his hospital stay. Armin remembered the exact words. "Baba, when I get better, can we go to the park and eat ice cream together? Just us two." At the time, Armin had smiled and said, "Of course, my lion, as many cones as you want." But money was tight, medicines expensive. Each day he promised himself he would buy one tomorrow. Tomorrow became next week and then someday. And when the call came from the hospital, it was already too late. Raffi's body had cooled, and all Armin had left was the cone he had finally purchased on the way to visit, dripping uselessly onto the white tiles as his knees gave way. That guilt had buried him alive. Selling ice cream after that was punishment, a constant reminder of the promise he had failed to keep. Yet, he had no other way to earn, so he chained himself to the cart like a prisoner. He thought he would spend the rest of his life in this gray haze. But then came the girl. Her innocence, her determination to keep her brother's memory alive, even with nothing but a melting cone, had cracked something inside him. It wasn't just pity he felt. It was recognition. She carried grief like he did, but in a way that didn't destroy her. She made room for love in her sorrow, whereas he had made only silence and regret. As the day went on, customers came and went. Children tugged their parents' sleeves. Young couples laughed as they shared cones. Old men bought bars to cool their tongues. Armin served them all, but his eyes kept searching for the girl, as if the world had shifted and he needed to see her again to believe it wasn't a dream. By sunset, the park began to thin out. The golden light spread across the grass, and the squeals of children faded into the chirping of crickets. Armin decided to pack up. He pushed the cart toward the park's exit, his legs heavy but his heart strangely restless. He hadn't felt this unsettled in years, not even when collectors had come knocking on his door for unpaid rent. This was different. As he reached the gate, he saw her again. The girl stood with her mother, who looked weary, her face lined with fatigue far beyond her years. She was scolding softly, tugging the girl's arm as if hurrying her along. The girl clutched the ice cream bar Armin had given her, still unopened. "Wait," Armin found himself calling out before he even realized. The woman turned, startled. Armin approached, feeling awkward. He rarely spoke more than necessary to customers, but something compelled him. I just wanted to make sure she got home safe," he muttered, gesturing vaguely at the girl. The woman softened slightly, though suspicion lingered in her eyes. "We live just nearby," she said. "She's fine, thank you for the ice cream." Armin nodded, about to leave, when the girl piped up. "Mama, he gave me 2 cones today. One for me, one for—" She stopped, glancing at her mother, then lowered her voice. You know who. The mother's expression flickered, a shadow of pain crossing her features. She pressed her daughter's hand gently. Yes, love, I know. Armin felt his throat tighten again. He wanted to say something, anything, but words felt clumsy. Instead, he crouched slightly so he was level with the girl. What's your name? Lena, she chirped, then leaned closer as if sharing a secret. And my brother's name was Sami. Armin swallowed hard. That's a beautiful name. The mother gave him a small nod of gratitude, then tugged Lena along. They disappeared down a side street, leaving Armin rooted to the spot, his chest heavy with something he hadn't felt in years. Connection. That night back in his small rented room, Armin lay awake. His wife slept fitfully beside him, coughing occasionally, her illness gnawing away like termites. He stared at the cracked ceiling, hearing Lena's voice echo in his mind. I don't want him to feel left out. He thought of Raffi. Did his boy feel left out wherever he was? Had he, as a father, abandoned him even in memory? Armin had buried his son in silence, avoiding his name, avoiding his smile in photographs. He thought it would make the pain less, but maybe it had only deepened it. Lena's way was different. She included her brother in everything, even if the world couldn't see him. And somehow that made her stronger. The next day, Armin pushed his cart to the park again. The sun was just as hot, the children just as loud, but he felt something shift inside him. He found himself looking for Lena almost unconsciously. And when she appeared, holding her mother's hand, his heart leapt. She waved at him cheerfully, as if they were old friends. He couldn't help but grin back. For the rest of the week, she came almost every day. Sometimes she bought one cone, sometimes two, always making sure Sami got his. She would sit on the grass, talking softly to the air, laughing at jokes only she and her brother seemed to understand. Armin began setting aside a little extra each day, an extra scoop, a bar tucked in his pocket just for her. He didn't tell her why. He only knew that when he saw her smile, it eased something jagged in his chest. But slowly, something else began to change too. Armin found himself talking to his wife more about Raffi. He dusted off the framed photo that had sat face down for years. He even dared whisper his son's name aloud without breaking. One evening, as his wife lay weak in bed, he brought her a small cone from his cart. She blinked in surprise, then tears filled her eyes. Raffi would have loved this, she whispered. For the first time, instead of guilt stabbing him, Armin felt warmth. Yes, he replied softly, he still does. Weeks passed. Summer deepened and the park became busier. Armin's cart squeaked faithfully along the paths, but his heart no longer felt like a prison. He had discovered something he thought he'd lost forever, the ability to give without despair. One evening, Lena came running to him, breathless. Sir, guess what? She said. Today is Sami's birthday. Armin's chest clenched. He nodded, swallowing hard. Then he deserves something special, doesn't he? He rummaged in his cart, pulling out two colorful cones topped with sprinkles, a luxury he rarely allowed himself to stock, too expensive for most customers. He handed them to her with a trembling smile. Happy birthday, Sami, he whispered. Lena's eyes shone. She placed one cone carefully beside her on the bench, as always, before digging into hers. Between bites, she whispered softly, he says thank you. Armin's vision blurred. He turned away quickly, pretending to wipe sweat from his brow, but inside he felt something break open. The weight of years of grief finally loosened, flowing out with his tears. For the first time since Raffi's death, he felt like he had honored his son not with sorrow, but with love. That night when he returned home, he sat by his wife's side and told her everything, about Lena, about Sami, about the birthday ice cream. She listened, her eyes wet, then reached for his hand. Maybe Raffi sent her to us, she whispered. Armin thought about that as he lay awake later. Maybe she was right. Maybe love never truly leaves. It just finds new ways to remind us it exists. From then on, Armin's cart was never just about survival. Every cone he handed out became a prayer, a memory, a bridge between the living and those they'd lost. And though his own life remained hard, though bills piled up and illness lingered, his heart carried something it hadn't in years: hope. And every evening, when Lena placed a cone carefully beside her on the grass for her unseen brother, Armin felt as though Raffi was there too, smiling, sharing the sweetness he had once been denied. The squeaky cart still rolled, but now, with each turn of the wheel, it carried not just ice cream but redemption.